Then something began chewing on his leg. Kael's eyes opened. A crooked ceiling of black leaves hung above him, veined with pale violet light that fell across a forest of monstrous roots and flowers large enough to swallow a house. A small insect with transparent jaws was biting into his flesh. Kael tried to scream. What came out instead was a weak, frightened chirp. He kicked the insect away and scrambled backward, and that was when he saw his body. No hands, no feet. In their place, tiny clawed stumps wrapped in soft gray scales. A thin tail dragged behind him. 2 fragile ears trembled above his head. He was barely the size of a rabbit. What happened to me? The insect recovered and spread its wings. Its body was no larger than Kael's head, but its jaws snapped hard enough to carve into the root beside him. Every instinct in his new body screamed the same word. Predator. It lunged. Kael rolled aside its jaws closed on empty air where his neck had been, and he stumbled, his wounded leg buckling under him just as the insect turned for a second pass. He had no weapon, no shelter, no idea where he was. He raised one claw anyway, and something inside him pulsed. The world didn't slow, exactly his senses simply sharpened, until he could see the air bending under the insect's wings, the precise angle of its open jaws, the exact point in space where its body would arrive a heartbeat from now. He thrust the claw forward and felt it sink into something soft. Black fluid spilled across the ground. The creature convulsed once and went still. Kael stood frozen over it, breathing hard, and a cold sensation slid through his skull. Translucent text unspooled in front of his eyes, as if projected onto the air itself. You have killed a glassjaw gnat. Biological material detected. Consume the target to initiate adaptation. No, Kael said, or tried to. He had dissected animals before, cataloged them, watched predators tear into prey in nature documentaries and necropsy labs alike. He had never once imagined becoming the predator. A roar rolled through the forest, distant but enormous, and the ground shivered under his stump legs. Kael looked toward the sound, then back down at the insect's corpse. He was bleeding. He was alone, and whatever lived out there was far bigger than him. He lowered his head and bit down. The taste was bitter, metallic. Wrong his mind recoiled even as his new body accepted it without hesitation, some instinct older than his own thoughts guiding the act. He ate the entire thing. The moment he swallowed the last piece, pain exploded through his jaw. His teeth loosened, fell out, and were replaced almost instantly by a row of thin, transparent fangs. His gums hardened. His vision sharpened another degree. Adaptation successful. Glassjaw structure acquired. Your bite strength has increased. Your teeth can now damage flexible plant fibers and weak insect shells. He ran his tongue over one new fang. He hadn't stolen the insect's biology, he'd integrated it. His body had studied the thing he'd eaten and rebuilt itself around what it learned. If that was true, every living thing in this forest was a door he could open. But it also meant every living thing around him had already survived here for generations, which was a far more dangerous fact than the first one. A drop of black liquid struck the ground beside his head. Kael looked up. Clinging to the underside of a leaf, the size of a rooftop, was something with 6 long legs, a pale, hairless body, and a circular mouth ringed with rotating teeth several times his size, and watching him eat. He ran. His stubby legs carried him under roots and through drifts of silvery moss, while the thing crashed through the undergrowth behind him with terrible speed. He squeezed through a gap beneath a fallen trunk just as it slammed into the wood above, splitting it. He kept crawling. A leg thrust into the gap after him, hooked claws scraping his tail, and he bit down without thinking. His new fangs found the joint, and the leg wrenched back with a shriek that shook dust from the ceiling. Kael didn't wait to see what happened next. He crawled out the far side and ran into the dark. The forest never stopped moving. Fruit gaped open like mouths whenever insects passed too close. Flowers exhaled spore clouds that dissolved whatever they touched. Somewhere in the canopy, a vine mimicked the cry of a wounded animal over and over, patient as a trap. Kael avoided all of it, and the only reason he could was the knowledge he'd carried over from his old life. Bright colors meant poison, still water meant something was waiting beneath it, and silence, real silence, meant something was too strong to need to hide. Hours passed. His wounded leg weakened. His stomach burned with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. Eventually, he found a hollow tucked behind a wall of thorned roots, narrow enough that nothing large could follow, and he dragged himself inside and collapsed. For the first time since he'd opened his eyes in this world, he was safe. He took stock of himself in the quiet. Soft gray scales, claws barely worth the name, ears that could catch nearby movement but nothing farther. He was not a monster. He was an infant, a newborn thing abandoned in the single most hostile ecosystem he could imagine. Species identification incomplete. Current classification, unregistered chimera larva. Age, less than 1 day. Condition, injured, malnourished. Adaptation potential, unknown. Unknown potential. He'd been reborn as something that fit no known category, a creature that could take on the traits of whatever it consumed. His ears twitched before he could think further. Footsteps out past the thorns, not the erratic movement of an animal, controlled, measured. Human. He crept to the mouth of the hollow and looked out. 3 figures picked their way through the roots in torn protective suits, carrying weapons etched with symbols he didn't recognize, their faces pale with exhaustion. "We should never have crossed the boundary," one of them said. A second man was clutching a bleeding arm. "The expedition's gone. The guide's dead. We need to reach the shore before nightfall." The third stared into the trees. "There is no shore anymore." Kael went cold. He knew this language, knew it strangely. From a television series and a stack of manga volumes back in his old life. This wasn't an unfamiliar world he'd woken up in. This was the world of hunters, and this forest wasn't part of the lands humans were meant to walk. He had reincarnated inside the dark continent, a place where whole expeditions vanished, where the strongest hunters alive could disappear without leaving a body behind. None of the 3 noticed the enormous flower opening directly above their heads. Kael watched its inner petals unfurl, thin needles angling downward, and before he could stop himself, a sharp warning chirp tore out of his throat. The men froze. The flower fired. One took a needle through the shoulder. Another dropped as a second needle found his leg. The third rolled clear and, for one unguarded second, looked straight at Kael's hiding place. Kael braced for an attack. "Run!" the man shouted instead, and the flower let loose another volley as the 3 of them scattered. Kael didn't trust them, but humans meant tools and knowledge, and maybe some understanding of what this place actually was, and staying close to them might keep him alive a little longer, one way or another. He followed at a distance until the smell of blood reached him. The wounded man had gone down beside a still black pool, and beneath its surface dozens of thin shapes were already gliding closer. The other 2 tried to haul him up. Kael watched from the roots, thinking that the smart choice, the safe choice, was to let them handle this alone. They were strangers. He wasn't human anymore. But some part of him still remembered what it felt like to drown, while people screamed his name from a deck he'd never reach. He stepped out of the shadows. One of the men swung his weapon toward him. "Monster." "Wait," said the one who'd seen him earlier. "That sound, it warned us." The pool erupted. A serpent wrapped in something like human fingers burst from the water and coiled around the fallen man, jaws stretching wide. And Kael was already moving. He leapt onto its neck and drove his new fangs between its scales. It shrieked and flung him into a tree hard enough to black out his vision for a second. The humans opened fire, their weapons spitting concentrated bursts of aura that tore through the serpent's flank. And as it recoiled to flee, Kael lunged and ripped a piece of exposed flesh away with his teeth. The serpent vanished back into the pool. Kael swallowed, and heat spread through his limbs. Biological material detected. Finger serpent tissue consumed. Compatible trait discovered. Muscular flexibility acquired. Minor regeneration acquired. His spine loosened, more flexible than before. His wounded leg pulled tight as torn flesh began, slowly, to knit itself shut. He stood. 3 humans stared back at him, one of them still holding a weapon leveled at his skull. "What is that thing?" the wounded man breathed. Kael looked at them, then down at the blood on his claws. He wasn't human anymore. He wasn't fully a beast, either. He was something between the two, something new. The leader lowered his weapon slowly. "You helped us." Kael answered with a quiet chirp. That was when the growl came low, enormous, rolling through the forest until every smaller creature went silent. The black pool stopped rippling. Even the carnivorous flowers folded shut. The humans went white. Kael's whole body began to shake before he understood why. Something had found them. Far off between the roots, 2 golden eyes opened in the dark, each one larger than a grown man. Extreme biological threat detected. Survival probability, 0.002. Emergency evolutionary path available. Consume powerful life forms. Adapt. Evolve. Survive. Kael stared at the 2 golden eyes drifting closer through the trees. He'd been alive for less than a day. He had no name here, no family, no territory, nothing but a body built to change. In the Dark Continent, weakness was a death sentence. So he decided he would eat whatever it took to survive. Poisons, predators, magical beasts, nen-born horrors. If it stood between him and staying alive, it would become part of him. He would keep evolving until nothing left in this forest could hunt him again. And someday, the things that ruled this land would learn to fear the small monster they'd failed to kill on the first day of its life. Chapter 2, First Evolution. The golden eyes kept coming, trees bent under a weight none of them could see yet. Kael's instincts screamed at him to run. His legs wouldn't listen. Beside him, the 3 explorers had gone equally still. Their leader, a scarred hunter named Darius, kept a white-knuckled grip on a metal staff carved with symbols. "Don't release your aura," he whispered. "It hunts through emotional disturbance." "What is it?" one of the others managed. Darius didn't look away from the dark. "A juvenile." Kael almost laughed. Whatever was coming shook the ground with every step, and it was only a juvenile. The shape resolved between the roots. A black feline the size of a house, with clusters of pale arms sprouting along its spine, each hand cupped protectively over a closed eye. Only the 2 golden eyes on its face stayed open. A long tongue trailed across the ground, tasting the air. One of the explorers began to shake. Then one of the hands on the creature's back twitched, and the eye beneath it opened. There was no lunge, no blood. One moment the wounded explorer was standing there, the next. Only his empty suit remained, folded neatly on the ground where he'd been. The others stumbled back. "It erases anything that looks at its hidden eyes," Darius breathed. Kael understood immediately that he had no way to fight something like that, but maybe he didn't need to. The creature's tongue swept the ground again, tracking scent, and Kael caught the smell of serpent blood still clinging to his own scales. An idea formed before he'd finished being afraid of it. He bolted for the black pool. "Where's it going?" Darius hissed. Kael reached the water, rolled through the film of blood still floating on the surface, and ran the other way straight past the humans, deeper into the forest. The feline's head turned. Its tongue found the new scent trail. It followed him instead of them. "It's drawing the creature off," Darius said, half to himself. Kael didn't have the speed to outrun it. He knew that with total certainty, so he didn't try. He hunted instead for something else dangerous enough to get in the way. His ears caught a low, rhythmic vibration under the ground, a territorial warning. He changed direction toward it. A field of red mushrooms pulsed around a mound of bleached bone, and coiled at its center slept an armored insect the size of a car. Kael ran straight across its shell. The feline crashed into the mushroom field a second later. Spores burst into the air in a red cloud, and the armored insect woke up screaming. The 2 monsters turned on each other. Kael was thrown clear by the shockwave of the first collision and landed beside a severed insect limb, still twitching. He didn't hesitate this time. He bit down. Biological material detected. Armor beetle tissue consumed. High compatibility. External carapace acquired. Pain ripped through him as his soft gray scales split and dark plates pushed up from underneath, spreading across his back, shoulders, and limbs. His claws thickened. His tail grew heavier. In the space of a few seconds, he went from rabbit-sized to something closer to a small dog. Growth threshold reached. First evolution available. Choose one evolutionary direction. Predator form, increased strength, speed, and hunting ability. Guardian form, increased defense, recovery, and environmental resistance. Adaptive form, reduced immediate growth, increased future trait compatibility. Predator form would help him hunt. Guardian form would help him survive today. But he'd already seen what lived in this forest: creatures that erased people with a glance, serpents wearing human fingers, insects the size of houses. Raw strength alone was never going to be enough here. He chose adaptive form. His body convulsed again. The transparent fangs receded slightly. The new carapace thinned but spread wider across his frame. His ears lengthened, and faint threads of violet light traced themselves beneath his scales. First evolution complete. Species, adaptive chimera infant. Traits retained. Glassjaw structure, muscular flexibility, minor regeneration, partial carapace. New innate trait acquired, biological memory. Fragments poured into his mind, not memories, exactly, but information. The gnat's feeding habits, the serpent's hunting patterns, the beetle's instinct to curl and brace before a strike. His ability wasn't only rewriting his body, it was teaching him how to be every creature he consumed. The battle in front of him hadn't slowed down to let him process any of it. The feline tore through the beetle's armor. The beetle sprayed a corrosive mist across its face in return. Scattered across the mushroom field were pieces of both of them, and every piece was a door. Kael crawled toward the wreckage low to the ground. A scrap of feline flesh lay under a broken mushroom cap. He took it. The instant his teeth closed on it, every hand along the feline's spine turned toward him at once. Dozens of hidden eyes began to open. He swallowed anyway. Unknown high-level organism consumed. Dangerous trait detected. Adaptation in progress. The forest disappeared. Kael stood in an endless white nothing, no trees, no monsters, no humans. Only a single golden eye, vast beyond comparison, hanging in the space above him. You ate something that belonged to me. The eye narrowed. And now I can see you. Kael understood, in that white silence, that his evolution wasn't a clean gift. Some traits had owners. Some powers came with a price attached, and he just signed for one without reading the terms. The golden eye drifted closer, and his new body trembled under its attention. He bared his transparent fangs anyway. You should have eaten me when you had the chance. The white world cracked from edge to edge, and Kael's second evolution began. Chapter 3, The Eye That Remembers. The crack spread like frost across glass, and through it Kael felt something he hadn't expected. Not pain, but pressure, the sensation of a much larger mind leaning its full weight against his. Bold, the eye said, and for the first time there was something under the word that wasn't quite amusement. Little things like you are usually gone before they finish the sentence. I'm still here. For now. The white space didn't vanish so much as peel back, layer by layer, revealing glimpses of things Kael's mind wasn't built to hold, centuries compressed into flashes. A forest that had grown and burned and grown again. Hunters who had come chasing rumors of treasure and left as empty suits folded neatly on the ground, generation after generation, the same as the man he'd watched vanish an hour ago. The eye wasn't just old. It was a graveyard that had learned to watch. Kael's biological memory, trait the same instinct that had handed him a gnat's feeding habits, and a beetle's defensive posture, reached for this new information the way it reached for everything else. It found nothing to hold on to. Whatever this creature was, it wasn't built like the rest of the forest. It didn't have traits so much as it had territory, and territory couldn't be swallowed in a single bite. But a piece of it could. Kael understood that the instant the pressure eased a fraction, not because the eye had let go, but because some small part of what he'd eaten was still his, still working, still trying to digest something too large for it. He grabbed onto that thread and pulled. Adaptation in progress, 61. Warning, host body strain critical. Recommend termination of process. No, Kael said and kept pulling. The eye's attention sharpened, and for a moment he felt the full, crushing weight of a predator that had never once needed to hurry. You don't understand what you're holding. I don't need to understand it. I just need to keep it. Adaptation in progress, 78. Something in the white space tore not the world this time, but Kael himself, a sensation like his own mind being peeled away from a much older one that had briefly wrapped around it. He held on anyway, the way he'd held on to the hollow beneath the thorn roots, the way he'd held on to consciousness in freezing water in a life that felt, now, impossibly far away. Adaptation in progress, 100. Partial trait secured. Eye of the hollow, mother passive. Warning, this trait carries an active marker. The source organism retains partial awareness of the host. Second evolution complete. The white space shattered, and the forest slammed back into place around him all at once. Sound, smell, the wet copper stink of the mushroom field, the ringing in his ears where the two golden eyes had been. Kael was lying on his side in the wreckage of the battle. His new evolution hadn't waited for him to be ready for it. His body had lengthened, his 4 stump legs now ending in claws long enough to grip bark. A second, thinner set of eyelids sliding closed and open again across his vision, adjusting instantly to the dim violet light. He was no longer dog-sized. He was closer to a wolf now, low and lean, carapace plates fitted along his spine like the beetle's had been, and threaded faintly with the same pale, sourceless glow he'd seen in the feline's eyes. The feline itself was gone. Not dead Kael could feel that much, distantly, the way you can feel a phone buzzing in another room. Wounded and retreating, and aware of him in a way it hadn't been an hour ago. Somewhere out past the tree line, a mind older than the human's entire civilization had just filed his existence under unfinished business. The armored beetle hadn't survived the fight. Its shell lay cracked open across the mushroom field, and around it the humans stood in a loose, stunned half-circle, weapons lowered, staring at the creature that had been rabbit-sized when they'd last looked at it. That's not possible, one of them said quietly. Darius stepped forward first, his staff held loose at his side rather than raised. He studied Kael the way Kael imagined a hunter studied anything that might either save his life or end it. It fought a vessel-class threat and grew twice in under an hour. It's not fighting, the wounded man said. It's eating. Then let's hope, Darius said, that it keeps deciding we're not on the menu. Kael pushed himself upright. His new legs held his weight easily, more easily than they should have this soon after an evolution, some remnant of muscular flexibility, maybe, or something new the beetle's tissue had contributed that he hadn't cataloged yet. He turned his head toward Darius and felt, for the first time since waking up in this body, something other than pure survival calculating behind his own eyes. Curiosity. Darius crouched slowly, keeping his hands visible, the universal language of I am choosing not to be a threat right now that apparently worked the same whether you were talking to a person or a half-formed monster. You understand me, he said, not a question. Kael tilted his head. He didn't have words, yet his throat wasn't built for human language. Might never be, but he understood the shape of what Darius meant, the same way he'd understood the beetle's instinct to curl before it braced. He answered with a low chirp, softer than the warning cry that had saved their lives twice already. It's not an animal, Darius said, straightening, speaking now to the others rather than to Kael. Or it wasn't born one. Something's in there that knows what a truce looks like. You want to travel with a monster that eats other monsters to get stronger, the wounded man said flatly. I want to travel with the only thing in this forest that saved my life twice in one afternoon, Darius said. Call it whatever you like. Kael looked past them, toward the tree line where the feline had vanished, and felt the faint, unwelcome pressure of eye of the hollow mother settle into the back of his awareness like a splinter that hadn't finished working its way in. Something out there hadn't forgotten him. Something out there was going to come looking, eventually, on its own terms. He had a choice to make, the same one he'd made standing over a dead Nat less than a day ago. He could go his own way, smaller, faster, harder to notice, and alone. Or he could stay close to the three humans who had just watched him do something none of them had a name for, and let alone become a problem for later. He thought about drowning. He thought about the deck of a ship, and voices calling a name that didn't belong to this body anymore. Kael walked forward, past Darius, until he stood at the front of the group facing deeper into the dark continent, and after a moment, the three humans fell into step behind him, because in a forest like this, the only rule anyone fully understood was, stay near whatever is still alive. Somewhere behind them, low and patient, a wounded creature with 100 closed eyes began, very slowly, to follow their scent. New objective available. Locate a safe evolution point before nightfall. Warning. Hollow mother tracking signature detected distance closing. Adaptation potential. Rising. Kael bared his fangs at the dark and kept walking.